Boy to mob boss, they beat up my blind sister. The boy's voice cut through the silence of the Beirut Palace restaurant like breaking glass. Glasses froze in midair. Conversations died. 50 pairs of eyes turned to the door where an 8-year-old black boy stood, trembling, blood staining his white school shirt. Jamal Williams shouldn't have been there. The Beirut Palace wasn't just a Lebanese restaurant in the heart of Chicago. It was the territory of Samir Al-Fayed, the man who controlled the south side of the city. The tables were occupied by men in expensive suits discussing business that would never be mentioned outside those walls. This was a place where even breathing wrong had consequences. But Jamal didn't care. When you're 8 years old and you've just seen your 6-year-old sister beaten unconscious, rules don't matter anymore. The boy charged across the hall, torn sneakers leaving bloodstains on the Italian marble. Security guards moved to intercept him, but something in that child's eyes made them hesitate. It wasn't fear. It was utter desperation. "Please!" Jamal shouted, his voice breaking. "They hit my sister. She can't see, and they hit her anyway." In the far corner, Samir Al-Fayed slowly lowered his cup of Turkish coffee. 45 years old, gray hair at the temples, eyes that had seen enough to age any soul. Impeccable charcoal gray suit and tucked into his belt, the red and white keffiyeh that had belonged to his father. Khalil, his right-hand man, gestured for the child to be removed. But Samir raised a hand, paralyzing everyone. Because something in that moment broke through the walls he had built around his heart over 20 years. Something in the boy's voice, in his desperation, in the mention of an injured younger sister. Something that transported him to a night he had spent 2 decades trying to forget. "Let him come closer," Samir said softly. "Samir, it could be a trap. The serpents." "I said let him come closer." Jamal stumbled to the table, grabbing the edge with both hands, small fingers leaving bloody marks on the white linen. "Sir," he gasped, tears cutting trails across his dirty face. "Everyone says you're the most powerful man in Chicago. That everyone is afraid of you. Please, my sister." His voice broke completely. Samir studied the boy. Clean but patched clothes. Second-hand sneakers. But he also saw courage. A boy who had crossed the most dangerous part of the city seeking help. "What's your name?" "J. Jamal, sir. Jamal Williams." "And your sister?" "Destiny. 6 years old, blind since birth." Jamal wiped his nose. "My mom works 3 jobs. We live above Mrs. Chen's laundromat on 47th Street. Men came demanding protection money. My mom didn't have any money. He couldn't go on. Samir felt something shift in his chest. A crack in the walls erected 20 years ago, when his sister Layla died in a bomb attack meant for him. Layla was 7. Blind in one eye. She died while he held her hand, promising to protect her forever. But he had failed. And since then, Samir hadn't cared enough about anyone to fail again. Until now. "Khalil, call Dr. Nasser. Priority emergency. Ambulance in." He looked at Jamal. "Where's your sister?" "In the laundry room. Mrs. Chen is with her, but there's a lot of blood." 47th Street, near Harrison, Samir finished for Khalil. "Now." He stood up, his entire imposing presence focused on the boy. "Jamal, I need you to be completely honest. These men who hurt your sister, would you recognize them if you saw them again?" "Yes, sir. One had a snake tattooed on his neck. Another had a scar here." He traced a line from his forehead to his cheek. "They wore red bandanas. And the one with the snake said, 'This is what happens when you don't pay Tony Vega.'" The entire restaurant seemed to suck in its breath. Tony Vega, lieutenant of the Chicago Serpents, a gang that had been trying to take Samir's territory for months. A man known for unnecessary cruelty. Samir felt something cold and deadly settle in. Not anger. Calculation. The cold decision of a man who had just drawn a line that no one should cross. "Jamal," he said, his hand on the boy's shoulder. "I'm going to take you back to your sister. She'll get the best treatment Chicago has to offer. But understand, from this moment on, you and your family are under my protection. No one will hurt you again." "Thank you, sir." "But," Samir continued, his voice more serious, "what happens in the next few hours cannot be discussed. Not with the police, Not with teachers, not with anyone. Whatever it takes to ensure safety. I will do. But you didn't see, you didn't hear, you don't know anything. Can you do that? Jamal swallowed hard and nodded. If you're following this story of courage and justice, subscribe to the channel, because what Samir was about to do would change not only Jamal and Destiny's lives, but the entire power dynamic on the streets of Chicago. And it all started with a boy who chose to believe that even the most feared man in town had a heart. The trip to the laundromat took 7 minutes. Samir personally drove his black Mercedes, with Jamal in the back seat between Khalil and another bodyguard. Behind them, 2 cars followed. One with Dr. Nasser and medical equipment. Another with 4 of Samir's men, all armed. Mr. Al-Fayed, Jamal whispered, looking out the window. My mother. She won't have a problem with me coming to you, will she? Samir looked in the rearview mirror. Your mother won't have a problem with anything. Ever again. When they arrived, Mrs. Chun was at the door, her hands shaking. Inside the laundromat, among overturned laundry baskets and broken machines, Destiny Williams lay on the floor. A woman kneeling beside her held the girl's hand, humming softly through her tears. Vanessa Williams was 32 but looked 50. 3 jobs stole what little remained after caring for 2 children alone. Her face was swollen from crying, her eyes red and desperate. Dr. Nasser entered first, kneeling beside Destiny. The girl was unconscious, blood drying on her small face. She had braids with pink ribbons, one of which was torn and stained red. Severe concussion, Dr. Nasser murmured, checking her pupils. Possible skull fracture. We need to move her now. Vanessa looked up when Samir entered, her face showing confusion and fear. Who are you? What? Mom! Jamal ran to her. I brought help. Mr. Al-Fayed is going to help Destiny. Mrs. Williams, Samir said calmly, kneeling down to her level. I'm Samir Al-Fayed. Your son came to me for help. Dr. Nasser is the best neurosurgeon in Chicago. Destiny is going to Northwestern Memorial Hospital now. Private room, 24-hour care. All paid for. Vanessa blinked, processing. I can't afford. I'm not asking for payment. Samir looked at Destiny, and something in his face hardened. No one should do this to a child. Especially a child who can't defend herself. As the paramedics prepared Destiny, Samir walked over to Mrs. Chun. What exactly happened? The elderly woman trembled. 2 men. They came demanding $400 for protection. Vanessa said she didn't have it. They started breaking the machines. Destiny got scared and started crying. One of them, he just hit her. Like it was nothing. Describe the men. One had a snake tattoo on his neck. The other had a big scar on his face. They were wearing red. They spoke Spanish to each other. Samir nodded to Khalil, who was already on the phone. I want full names, addresses, everything on these 2. And I want to know where Tony Vega is now. We're on it, boss. At the hospital, while Destiny was being taken to surgery, Samir sat with Vanessa in the waiting room. Jamal was sleeping in a chair, exhausted. Why are you doing this? Vanessa asked softly. Everyone knows who you are. Why help people like us? Samir was silent for a long moment. Then he took an old worn photo out of his pocket. It showed a boy of perhaps 25 holding a little girl who was smiling despite the bandage over one eye. My sister Layla, he said quietly. 20 years ago, she was Destiny's age. She was also partially blind. She died because men like Tony Vega think violence against innocent people is acceptable. He put the photo away. I spent 20 years building up enough power so that no one could hurt me again. But I realize now that power without purpose is empty. Vanessa wiped her eyes. Those men will come back. They'll want revenge for me coming to you. They won't, Samir said with absolute certainty. Because they won't be around to come back. 3 hours later, Dr. Nasser emerged from surgery. She'll make a full recovery. She was lucky. A few more minutes without treatment. He didn't need to finish. As Vanessa went in to see Destiny, Khalil approached Samir. We found them. Carlos Cobra Martinez and Diego Ruiz. They're at a bar on Western Avenue. And Tony Vega is at a club on the north side. Alone, with only 2 security guards. Samir stood up, adjusting his fists. Gather the team. But first, he looked at the security guard posted at Destiny's door. Double the security here. No one comes in or out without my permission. What about the serpents? Khalil asked. When they find out we got their men. They won't find out, Samir interrupted. Because we're going to do this in a way they'd never expect. He picked up his cell phone. Call Marcus at the Tribune newsroom. Tell him I have a story that will interest him. A story about gangs beating blind children for protection money. Khalil's eyes widened. You're going to make this public? I'll do better than that, Samir said, a cold smile touching his lips. I'll make this Tony Vega's downfall. And he'll beg to go to prison when I'm done with him. Carlos Martinez and Diego Ruiz were found 2 hours later, exactly where Khalil said they would be. The bar on Western Avenue emptied quickly when Samir's men entered. There was no resistance. There was no drama. Just the heavy silence of 2 men realizing they had made a fatal mistake. They were taken to a warehouse in the industrial district. Empty, windowless, just concrete walls and the kind of privacy that allowed for serious conversations. Samir arrived 30 minutes later. Not angry. Not immediately violent. With something much scarier, cameras. Mr. Al-Fayed, Carlos stammered, sweat dripping down his face. Look, if it's about the laundry, it was just business, man. Tony said. Tony said, Samir repeated calmly, positioning 3 cameras at different angles. Interesting. So Tony Vega ordered you to beat up a 6-year-old child? A blind girl. Diego tried bravado. We didn't know the girl was blind. So if she wasn't blind, it would be acceptable? Samir turned on the cameras, red lights flashing. Tell me, gentlemen, how much exactly did Vanessa Williams owe? 400, Carlos muttered. $400. Samir let the words hang. And for $400, you thought it appropriate to destroy her workplace and beat a child unconscious. The silence confirmed everything. Now, Samir continued, his voice remaining dangerously calm, I'm going to make you a one-time offer. You're going to tell everything on these cameras. How many families you extorted. How much money you collected. And you're going to explain in detail how you beat Destiny Williams. Every punch. Every kick. Everything. Man, are you crazy? Diego protested. That's a death sentence. Tony will. Tony Vega, Samir interrupted, isn't going to do anything. Because in exactly 45 minutes, all of this will be in the hands of the FBI, the local media, and every social media platform that exists. He leaned closer. The only question is, do you want to cooperate and maybe get a chance at federal prison, or would you rather I hand you back to the serpents after this video leaks? I imagine Tony won't be happy when he realizes you've exposed him. Carlos was the first to break. Fine. Fine, I'll talk. But I need protection, man. I need. Khalil, Samir said calmly. Call Agent Sullivan at the FBI. Tell him I have information about Serpent's operations in 5 states. 20 minutes later, Carlos and Diego had confessed everything on camera. Names, dates, amounts, locations. A complete extortion network that spanned 12 neighborhoods. But Samir wasn't done. While his men held Carlos and Diego in custody awaiting the FBI, Samir went personally to get Tony Vega. Not to kill him. Not to beat him up. To destroy him in a way that would hurt much more. Tony was at his club, surrounded by security guards, drinking $1,000 champagne, completely oblivious to the fact that his empire was collapsing at that very moment. Samir entered through the main gate. Alone. Unarmed. Just his phone in his hand. Tony Vega, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Samir Al-Fayed. I need to show you something. Tony stood up, confused but trying to maintain his composure. Al-Fayed? What the hell do you want at my? Samir simply turned his phone around, showing the screen. It was a live stream of the news. The anchor was speaking while images of Destiny Williams in the hospital appeared on the screen. Chicago Serpents gang under federal investigation after shocking video leaked showing members confessing to beating 6-year-old child for protection money. Tony Vega, identified as the leader of the operation, is wanted by the FBI. The club fell completely silent. Tony snatched the phone from Samir's hand, eyes wide as he watched his face appear on national television. Photos of him. His full name. His criminal record. "You," Tony whispered, his face turning pale. "You turned me in?" "Not exactly," Samir said calmly. "Your own men did that. I just made sure the story got to the right people." "Oh, and the video? It's already got 4 million views. It's everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Every second showing exactly the kind of cowardly man you are." Tony looked around, realizing that his own security guards were backing away. No one wanted to be near him now. Not when the FBI was on its way. "You can't do this," Tony shouted. "You think I'm going down alone? I know things about you, Al-Fayed. I'm going to." "Do what?" Samir interrupted. "Report me? You think anyone will believe you after this video? You think you have any credibility left?" He moved closer, his voice lowering to a deadly whisper. "You beat up a blind girl, Tony. A 6-year-old who couldn't even see the blows coming. And you did it for $400. Sirens began to wail outside. The FBI had arrived. "Here's what's going to happen," Samir continued. "You're going to be arrested. You're going to be prosecuted federally. And every day in prison, you'll remember that you fell not because you were weak, but because you chose to hurt someone who couldn't defend themselves. And when you're sitting in your cell, thinking about how you got there, remember the name Destiny Williams. The girl you thought was too insignificant to matter." Federal agents burst through the door. Tony was thrown to the floor, handcuffed while shouting empty threats. Samir simply watched, his expression impassive. Outside, Khalil waited in the car. "The networks are blowing up, boss. Everyone is sharing. The Serpents are panicking. Half the leadership is already fleeing the city." "Good," Samir said, getting into the car. "Let's go to the hospital. I need to see how Destiny is doing." When they arrived, Jamal was awake in the waiting room, holding his mother's hand. When he saw Samir, the boy quickly stood up. "Mr. Al-Fayed, Destiny is awake. The doctors say she's going to be fine." For the first time in 20 years, Samir Al-Fayed smiled genuinely. "Can I see her?" In the room, Destiny was sitting up in bed, her head bandaged but her eyes alert despite her blindness. When Samir entered, she turned her head toward the sound. "Is that you?" she asked in a small voice. "The man my brother said would help us?" "It's me," Samir replied gently. Destiny held out a small hand. Samir took it carefully. "Thank you for saving us," she whispered. And in that moment, Samir knew it had all been worth it. 6 months later, the laundromat on 47th Street was gone. In its place was Destiny's Flowers, a flower shop with large windows and natural light flooding every corner. Vanessa Williams stood behind the counter, arranging white roses, while Destiny sat on a high stool, her fingers delicately touching the petals, learning each flower by touch and scent. Jamal came running in after school, his new backpack bouncing on his back, wearing the private school uniform that Samir had insisted on paying for. "Mom, I got an A in math." "I'm proud of you, baby," Vanessa smiled, an expression that had become frequent since their lives had changed completely. The doorbell rang. Samir entered, as he had every Tuesday for the past 6 months. Not as the feared Chicago crime boss, but as the man who had chosen to use his power to protect rather than destroy. "Mr. Samir." Destiny shouted, recognizing his footsteps. She no longer needed to call him Mr. Al-Fayed. He had insisted that Mr. Samir was sufficient. "Hello, Destiny," he said calmly, kneeling beside her. "How are your Braille lessons going?" "I'm reading on my own now. Want me to show you?" As Destiny ran to get her book, Vanessa approached Samir. "Did you see the news today?" Samir nodded. Tony Vega had been sentenced that morning. 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Carlos and Diego got 15 years each, their recorded confessions being the final nail in their coffins. But most importantly, 17 other victims of the Serpents had come forward after the video went viral. The entire gang had been dismantled by the FBI. Justice has been served, Samir said simply. Because of you, Vanessa replied softly. Because of what you did. Because of what Jamal did, Samir corrected. He was brave enough to ask for help when he needed it. I just made sure the help came. But it wasn't just that, and everyone knew it. Samir had created the Layla Al-Fayed Foundation, dedicated to helping visually impaired children in underserved communities. $2 million a year. Destiny was the first beneficiary, but there would be hundreds more. The entire neighborhood of 47th Street was now under Samir's silent protection. Not extortion. Real protection. The serpents had disappeared. Other gangs knew better than to try to fill the vacuum. And local businesses were thriving for the first time in years. Mr. Samir, Jamal said, appearing beside him. Can I ask you something? Always. Why did you help us? Really? I know about your sister, but there were so many people before us. Why were we different? Samir was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. For 20 years, I built power thinking that strength meant not caring. That to survive in my world, I needed to have a heart of stone. He looked at Destiny, smiling as she read her Braille book. But you showed me that true strength isn't not caring. It's caring so much that you walk through the most dangerous city alone to save your sister. It's having the courage to ask for help when you need it. It's being vulnerable enough to trust. He put his hand on Jamal's shoulder. You didn't give me a reason to help. You gave me a reason to be better. Tears glistened in Vanessa's eyes. That night, as Samir drove back through the streets of Chicago, Khalil broke the silence. You know you've changed, right? You're not the same man you were 6 months ago. I know, Samir admitted. And I don't miss who I was. His phone rang. It was Jamal, sending a photo. Destiny was holding a certificate from the special school where she now studied. Student of the Month was written in Braille and regular letters. Samir saved the photo next to the old one of Layla. 2 girls. 20 years apart. One he couldn't save. The other, he had saved in time. Boss, Khalil said. People are asking about the Serpent's territories. Several want to know if we're going to take over. No, Samir interrupted. Leave them as they are. Protected but free. Those neighborhoods have suffered enough from men like Tony Vega. I'm not going to be another tyrant. Khalil smiled. Layla would have been proud. Destiny is proud, Samir replied. And this time that's enough. 3 months later, an NBC News report interviewed Vanessa Williams about the transformation of 47th Street. When asked about Samir Al-Fayed, she said something that would be repeated thousands of times online. People say he's dangerous. That he's a feared man. And maybe he is. But my son saw something others didn't see. He saw that beneath the power, beneath the reputation, there was a man who understood pain. And when you understand pain, you can choose to cause more or to prevent others from feeling the same. The video went viral. 17 million views. Comments from people sharing their own stories of childhood courage, of asking for help, of finding unlikely saviors. And in a federal prison cell, Tony Vega watched the video on the news, realizing too late that he had completely underestimated what happens when you hurt the wrong people. Not because they were powerful, but because they were innocent enough to remind others of what they had lost. Because sometimes, the smallest hands carry the courage that giants have forgotten to have. And sometimes, all it takes to change a hardened man is a child brave enough to believe that hearts of stone can still bleed. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove courage has no size, that justice can come from the most unlikely places, and that sometimes heroes don't wear capes. They wear torn sneakers and carry unconditional love for sisters they can't see but feel everything. Jamal Williams was 8 years old when he taught the most feared man in Chicago what it really meant to be strong. And Samir Al-Fayed spent the rest of his life proving that he had learned his lesson.